Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. And we've created a platform for various groups of people, whether it be college community centers, whether it be athlete community centers, organizations, to find a place where they can network and connect in that affinity relationship. And one thing along the way that we found is that with athletes transitioning out of sports, it's a major issue today, whether it's mental health or financial literacy, different challenges. And we've created this show to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. And we're really excited today to have Myriam Glez with us. And she's going to tell us all about later on. She's got doing some amazing things in this space, but her background is she's from France. And she grew up there, and she was a synchronized swimmer, kind of went up through the ranks of club sports and ultimately became an Olympian, which is fantastic. And then after that, she was in the business world, kind of taking some different avenues of marketing in the hospitality space. But more importantly, now she's the founder and CEO of Athlete Soul, which again, we're going to talk more about. So welcome to the show, Myriam.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's a great pleasure. So I always talk about when people started. So growing up, being involved in sports, talk a little bit about that and how it kind of shaped your life.
Yeah, so I started very early on, 5 or 6 years old, and straight as a synchronized swimmer. And very quickly, I actually went into training every day and at an intense level pretty quickly. So sport early on shaped everything I did because it just was so overwhelming, my daily schedule, that everything was organized around sport. And it taught me a lot of things when it comes to time management but also friendship and commitment and hard work. Everything revolved around what I was doing for my sport.
Yeah, I mean, I got to imagine. I mean, you talk about, for you, because anytime I talk to swimmers, I've talked to a few other ones, and then even like, seems like ice skaters too, like having to get in, like for you in the pool, like really early in the morning and all the practices. I mean, it's got to be draining, especially when you're going to school too, I would imagine.
Yeah. So growing up in France, we're not early morning people. So there actually are no early morning practices. There was no early morning practices for me growing up.
That's
But
great.
definitely like 3-4 hours at least after school every day. Every 4, 5, 6 days a week, starting when I was 8 or 9 years old. So quickly, it kind of overwhelms your schedule, and you have to plan things around. You have to be able to do your homework in the car. You have to be able to like eat at any time of the day and fit things around what's happening training.
Yeah, that's got to be, it's difficult. And I mean, I talk to probably like even from a social life standpoint, it's hard because, you want to be nice to be able, and we talk a little bit about, how I run cross country and track in high school and college, but you don't get to spend as much time probably as friends because you got to be so dedicated to your sport and your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I try to tell people is that I never saw it as a sacrifice because my friendships were in my team at the pool. So I didn't feel like I was missing out on social life because I felt like I had a great social life. I had tons of friends at the pool. I knew tons of athletes, not necessarily just in my sport, but I knew, swimmers and divers, and we spent a lot of time together, and we had respect for each other because of what we were all trying to achieve. So I think from a social perspective, I never thought I missed out. I just had a different type of social life.
Well, it's you're right. I think about it too. My social life was wrapped around my team and my friends from that. So that's definite. Talk a little bit about synchronized swimming. Just tell everybody about how that works, and for the novices that like myself that probably don't watch it as much on the Olympics like we might see it, but talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So synchronized swimming would be like gymnastic in the water. I
Okay.
think often that's how it's sort of been defined, like ballet in the water. It's been around for quite a while. It's a very popular sport in other countries, especially in Europe and Asia. So there were a lot of synchronized swimmer where I grew up. I saw it on TV, and that's how I got inspired to start in the sport. It's a very demanding sport in terms of the number of hours that you train, because we do essentially a lot of different sports. So you have to be a good gymnast, you have to be flexible, you have to do strength training outside of the pool, ballet, but then you also do a lot of swimming and then your sport. So which, you know, during the week you would be doing a little bit of everything. And you have to like try to figure out how to fit that in each day. So it's a very comprehensive sport, and very brainy as well, I would call it, because you have to remember routines, and there's a lot of elements that are related to like your mental game, in addition to being very physical.
Is it individualized or team, like as far as like in the water?
Yeah, so you have multiple events, so you can do it
Okay.
individualized. Individual is the solo. You can do it as a pair, and then you can do it as a team. So that's 8 athletes. And generally, as a kid growing up, you do all of the events. Essentially, you know, you develop like different skills through all of that. And then as you get to the highest level, the top two usually do the pair, and then the rest do the team. In the Olympics, there's only two events, the pair and the team. So I swam the duet, the pair, and the team at the Olympics.
Got you. And where I forget, did you won a gold medal or
I did not win a gold medal. I would have loved to.
we'll
My
give you
best
the gold
result,
medal.
exactly, my best result was actually fourth
Okay.
in the Olympics in Sydney. Which I get a lot of questions on, like, oh, you missed out on the bronze medal, but we were actually super happy. This was a step up for us, going into fourth place compared to previous results. So we were really happy with the performance, and never felt that I missed out on any medal.
Who's typically the best country in synchronized swimming?
In the last 15 to 20 years, Russia has been dominating the sport. And then the Asians are very good as well, China, Japan. And then when I was competing, it was very much in Europe, was very much Russia, France, and then the American and Canada. So it's changed a little bit over the last few years. But yeah, that's the ranking.
And even like, like with the medals, I mean, people need to realize that, like you said, I mean, coming in fourth place is like astronomical. I mean, compared to, it's almost like, I think when people look at sports too, like baseball, for example, some of these major league players, that as a fan perspective, they're not doing very well. They're low batting average, whatever it might be. You're like, oh, well, they're not very good, but like they're elite. And the same thing with you. I mean, it's especially when you think about how many other teams you're competing against, different countries, to get those three spots has to be, slim odds. I mean, you really got to be phenomenal to win a medal.
Absolutely. And I think, when you dedicating so much time into an activity, I think you not just looking at that, like especially in synchronized swimming, where it's a judge sport, and part of the judgment is linked to, whether the judge like your style or your music, and it's related to the culture. So there is a lot of things that you cannot control. But I think you find success and achievement also in the pleasure of like having swum a good routine, or being able to perform it to the level that you want, that sort of thing. So I think it's important to look at all of these aspects and not necessarily like the result at the very end.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to imagine too, being in a pool probably makes it that much more challenging when you're trying to synchronize with the, with your teammate, if it's one or just the team, as compared to, I mean, even dancing, I guess, is what I think of, like, think of like, like in the US, like the Rockettes or any, just these plays that, how you have to be synchronized like that too.
Absolutely. Like you have to be in sync with 7 other people, and that takes years. And so sometimes just achieving that, and making sure that, your weakest of the 8 is at their best performance, could also be the goal that you want to achieve. So, looking at all the different angles of what you're doing, and not just the actual result, for me was really important.
Looking at, it was something that we talk about a lot on the shows, whether it's high school, college, professional, like once you're transitioning out, sport, a lot of, it seems like there's a need for more education, and so talk about how they, on your end, was there, efforts to, if not then, now more efforts to kind of work with the athletes and to help them to see the bigger picture once they're done. And then, so look at it from your own perspective, and then also from what you see and what you're doing today, ways that whether it's colleges, organizations, what they're doing, and maybe how they could do it better.
Yeah, so growing up and doing sport in France, I think was slightly different in the sense that you have to pursue a dual career. You have to continue your academics and your sport in parallel. And if you don't do that, you actually don't access your scholarship. So that was kind of forced upon you. But in addition to that, I was also pretty good at school. And so I always wanted to follow that path and had pretty highest level and standards for myself in school. And so I think that was always good for me to have like a backup plan. Sorry. And to know that my sport was not a professional sport, that I couldn't make a living from it. So I needed to have that backup plan. It was necessary. Having said that, I think that there are way more awareness these days for the athletes to develop multiple options for themselves and not rely on one thing. I think they are, you can see more conversation around I'm this and this and this.
Right.
And I want to do multiple things. And yeah, this is my plan A, but I may have plan B and C. So I think athletes are looking at their career from a more holistic perspective. They're looking at their options. They're looking at creative ways to get to where they want to go. And I think NIL is also helping them, have little jobs on the side as well. So all of these things are helping, I think, be better prepared for a career after sport.
Yeah, which is great. And I think I think every school is different. I mean, some of what we're trying to do at Alumni Direct is looking to go into schools and, with a group of resources, folks like yourself and whether it be athlete transition coaches or, mental health or financial, but sitting down and rolling up the sleeves and working together with them to, everybody says they have their own thing, but like, how do we get more help to athletes? And so that, as they do transition out of sports, that there's more resources, and to your point, it's more of a holistic approach. I think so. We're trying to do some of that, and a lot of the conversations that I've had with other companies are, talking about the same thing. So with NIL, you touched it briefly. So this is a hot topic, and I guess give me your thoughts on the positive and the negative of NIL right now.
All right, I think the positives is that athletes can make some money, whether it is being a top football player in the college space, and you can actually take advantage of that and really get some sponsors to support you, to the niche sport and kind of lower profile athletes who actually can work other jobs like any other student and actually not lose their scholarship because they're doing and taking other jobs like coaching or modeling or whatever that is. So I feel like it's bringing some equality between athletes and student, because students are already doing other jobs. And then it's helping the top athletes, benefit from the college market and not just have the university being the one reaping off all the benefits.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How about, and I've heard both, I got some background noise there. I've heard both, like on the negative side, and this is something I think, I always say it could be for anybody, but it seems like people talk about financial literacy, especially at a young age. And so all of a sudden you've got this, if you're fortunate enough to get a windfall of money, knowing that you need to pay tax and different things like that. And so I think there needs to be more education. Like I've talked to some former NFL players, and that was their reaction was like, hey, I would have loved it when I was, because it wasn't around when they were playing, but they would have loved it if it was there, but that was their concern. I mean, do you see avenues of that? And maybe that's even some of the things that you're addressing, with Athlete Soul.
Yeah, I think some of the negatives are also due to the fact that it's all very new and still very uncharted, right? So it has impacted the transfer portal a lot. It has impacted how scouting is done, how coaches interact with athletes, how schools are funding the different athletes. It definitely impacts the athletes, and you know, some of them are staying away from it because they don't understand a lot of it. I think generally there needs to be a lot more education on the financial literacy aspect, but on how to select, you know, agent, how to work with financial planners, how to select the right people to work with when you're suddenly exposed to a lot of money, and how to stay involved in it, how to plan for the future. There's a lot of education, I think, at every legal level, and even on like the legal side, like contract and how to read contract and sign contract. I mean, there's so many different aspects. I mean, I think it will be difficult for athletes who have this additional level of stress and things to deal with when you already have a full-on schedule. But when things settled, I think it's going to be for the better. But yeah, it's definitely a frenzy right now.
Yeah, no, I guess they say sometimes they call it the wild, wild west. So one of the things that we're passionate about, and with Alumni Direct on our platform, is just the whole interaction between alumni and even alumni, and whether it be current students as well, just having that affinity relationship. So from your perspective, and kind of take it in your own world, and then maybe also just what you're seeing around you, was there much alumni interaction, let's say, for example, with France, like as far as the athletes go, were there athletes, you know, former athletes coming back and kind of interacting and trying to help the current athletes?
It's hard for me to tell when it comes to France because I haven't lived in France for 15 years or more. So I'm kind of far removed from it. I don't have a lot of relationship with former teammates of mine that are still based in France. Having said that, what I observe is there is more and more need for it and will to connect and interact, simply because we have the tools to do that now. And so I think there's more and more engagement. I've started engaging more with my school, with former teammates, with different sport. And it's really I think it's been more recent in the last several years. And I think COVID has brought that on too. Yeah, we're all far away, but yet we can use this as a way to reconnect with a lot of different organizations. So I think it's changing, and it has changed because of the tools we now have.
And that's great, because a lot of times here in the US, we talk about, you know, typically with schools, a lot of times people get a little concerned about, you know, fundraising, the efforts of donations and people calling on that. But there's so much value for me. I know that I'm in South Florida, so when I meet a fellow Delaware alumni, my first inclination is like, how can I help you? It's just because you don't know how that person is, but you have that step up. So same thing for an athlete. Like, I think whether you're a former, football player, basketball player, swimmer, you still have that affinity. Like, hey, you all worked hard to get, you worked hard to get where you're at, and you're structured and schedules and things like that. So there's that common bond that's there. And I think it's important to utilize it. A lot of people don't know how to do it. I was talking to one professional agent, and he said the best time for athletes to network and connect is when they're actually playing their sport. And for the most part, they don't, because either they're afraid to, they don't know how to, or they're just so consumed in what they're doing. And I think it's important, and hopefully, that's some of the things we're trying to achieve here, is just to facilitate that alumni relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to insist on what you said, that that common bond, I think, is really strong between athletes of any sport. I think current athletes and former athletes really relate to each other. There is this sort of understood feeling that you've committed yourself to something difficult, to working hard every day, to do that at a time in your life where others are maybe partying and doing other things.
Yeah.
And I think there's that respect that comes with it. So that bond, I think, is really strong. And I think we see a lot more networking, not just for professional purposes, but also for like social support and sort of getting ideas from others, creativity, you know, developing relationship that you would have not done otherwise. We use that a lot with athletes. So also we do like virtual and in-person networking events, discussions, social events, and we see the bond between athletes. So it's instant, like when you can talk about, you know, old practices and stress of competition, different things like that. Yeah.
No, that's great, and it's important. I mean, it's again, you have something to relate to. So, take us through now. And again, this you'll talk more about as far as athlete soul goes, but just athletes transition out of sport. Talk a little about your transition out of swimming into, you know, as I mentioned in the beginning, to the business world, and then ultimately to founding. Kind of take us through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I retired in 2002, kind of not by choice. I was asked by my coaches to choose between my academics and my sport. That was a couple of years before going to the Athens Olympics. And they basically told me, you have to choose between going to business school or preparing for the Olympics. So being in a sport that doesn't pay and does not have a professional career outlook, I decided that, you know, business school was the better choice. And so yeah, I kind of stopped and thought that was the end. And I attended school, I found a job, I moved to Australia with the company I was working with, and ended up resuming my career in synchronized swimming, but for the Australian team while I was working. So I actually came back and retired again in 2008 after the Beijing Olympics.
Oh, okay, that's good. Were you in 2 Olympics then?
I was in 2 Olympics, the first one for France and the second one for Australia.
Okay. Which one was a better experience? I guess I won't put you to say that. So, I could have been, this was the better one, France, but we don't want to get either team upset there. So, yeah,
they were different experiences and both valuable. I think it's incredible to be able to compete for another country and experience like a different mindset. So I see them with a completely different eyes. And the first one, you know, was my first Olympics, and it sort of like that first impression is really strong, while the second one was like trying to take it all in from a different perspective, which was good as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So it was so once you kind of were done with the swimming after the second Olympics, was it a hard transition for you, just being kind of done with the sport, and maybe not done like you did on the side maybe, but just being done with it and then doing other things?
So my second transition was actually the easiest one, because I had already retired. I thought I would never swim again. So I took that second experience as like the cherry on top, you know. I took advantage of it. I had a job already.
You cut out there for a second. You're on mute.
Oops, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of background noise. Hang on, give me 1 second. I wanted to get rid of the background noise. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I was saying like my second transition was much better, much easier. I had a full-time job. I was married, had like more of a stable life. So I had something to like fall back onto compared to the first one. And because I had chosen to retire, unlike the first time, and I took that second experience as like the cherry on top. So like it was a completely different way of approaching it, and it was much easier, and it kind of like run really smoothly, to be honest.
So what kind of advice would you give to athletes, you know, regardless of the sport, once they're once that time is up?
I think the first advice for me is like, don't wait. You know, you need to consider all of your options when you're playing, and have plan A, B, C, D, Z. so that you know, in the ideal scenario, this is what I want to do, but if that doesn't work, what else do I do, and how do I get there from a different way? I think making sure that you're really creative when you think about it. There's multiple ways to get to where you want to be, and then start looking at what else are you passionate about outside of your specific sport, and dive and explore those interests, because you can build on those to help your transition. And it's much better to build on something that you have a passion for than to try to like figure out what you want to do when it's over. So, prepare before it happens.
Yeah, no, that's great, because you're right. Probably a lot of people don't do that, unfortunately, and that's where they start going. And I know that kind of leads up to athlete soul. And I always say in the beginning, it kind of give that 30,000-foot view of what you're doing, but you're doing a lot of exciting things. And tell us more about athlete soul and some of these initiatives, and they might even tie into some of the things we've been talking about here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Athlete Soul is a nonprofit organization that I founded 3 years ago with a group of former athletes. And our mission is to support retiring athletes during that transition away from sport, but also to prepare current competing athletes for what comes next. So we offer services to competing athlete, to retiring athlete, and to retired athlete. And our services are mostly around coaching, group coaching, individual coaching during the transition, so transition coaching and career coaching, and a lot centered around networking for social and professional purposes. So these are like sort of the 3 areas that we're focused on.
And so is it do you actively go out there? Like how do people find out more about it? Like athletes find out more about it?
Yeah, so we actually receive a lot of direct requests for athletes who either find us from Google for a search on career services or transition services, but also referral from other athletes who have gone through our program, as well as from different sporting organizations, from our coaches. So we work with 20 coaches from different sports, and they bring a lot of leads from their own network of athletes that they work with. We're starting to work with in the world of tennis, so that brings a lot of leads. So we don't do specifically like outreach to the athletes themselves, but we do outreach to those who work with athletes.
Okay.
And then we get a lot of referral from those who've been in the programs too.
Got it. No, that makes sense. So you said it's like, career services and mental health and things. What is there one area that you kind of excel at, within that, or is it just kind of spread out?
I think what we are really good at is providing that holistic support within like a one-on-one framework. So basically, when an athlete works with us, the majority of the time they work one-on-one with a coach for an extended period of time, 3 months or more. And what we do is really adjust the work that we do with them to their main priority. So if someone is struggling with nutrition or mental health, or there's the structure of their day, we will start addressing these challenges first. So it's really customized to where they at and what they need. And I think that's the best way to answer the retirement from sport, because each individual has such a different story, comes with such a different background. We serve athletes from all sports, all level, from collegiate to Olympic athlete. And so each individual will come with a different situation. Maybe they are a sailor or a fencer, and they've just finished college, or they got injured, or they're a pro, but they were not re-signed to a contract. So you can't really apply the same solution to each of these athletes. So I think that's what we're good at, is like really taking them where they're at and putting a plan together that fits where they're at and help them move forward from there.
Do you see it going down to it's been a lot of different talk about, but going down to the high school level as well, or is it pretty much something that you see mostly like college and beyond?
So I think specifically the one-on-one transition services is for college and beyond. But we also do have programs for competing athletes. Currently, we service mostly the college athletes. And that program is really to help athletes learn about themselves, explore interests that they have outside of sport, and take steps to be better prepared. And I see this eventually will probably, be available to high school athletes as well, because the earlier you can prepare and the earlier you have multiple paths and multiple options for yourself, the better it will be. So at the moment we do not, but I think it will in the future.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, because I've seen it. Like, it's interesting. I've had some conversations. Like one was with a teacher, high school teacher, who's real involved in, like, sponsoring and athletes and stuff at professional level too. But he teaches an entrepreneurial class, and just talking about, just kind of teaching them about, now at that high school level. There's another company that works with helping to prepare the high school athlete to what's the best school for them. And you've hit on a couple of times, which I think is great. Like, that holistic approach is that it shouldn't just be about, okay, well, I want to play football at Ohio State or Georgia, like one of the big schools, but what else do you want to do? So, like, if they kind of have that mindset going in that, maybe I can go to this other school, but I get more of what I want to do for the future, my education, my social experience, everything else, maybe that's a better fit. And it's interesting that approach, taking that holistic approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you can have an ideal path and then think about, well, what if I'm a walk-on at a different school, or what if I look at a smaller school, or maybe a less prominent program in sport, but maybe that has the majors that I want to do. I think a lot of athletes will choose their school based on the sport, but don't really consider the academics as well, or the social life, or some of the other things that they can do on the side. So trying to have multiple options. I think alternative paths are more available these days, which give, again, some creativity to be able to fit everything. I think looking at timing as well is important. How do you fit, your career and your college, and you have a long-term plan? For me, that makes a lot of sense, because as an athlete, I planned everything around, like, the 4-year cycle of the Olympics. So I needed to be done with this diploma or degree by this year, so that it would not be overlapping with my Olympic year, but then I would start something after the Olympics. So there were times where I took time off, and there were times where I went back to school. And so, just looking at the long term of what are your goals long term, and how do you fit everything in between, to be able to reach all of your goals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So tell people how to find you, like where to find you, like the site, and some of your different social media handles.
Yeah, absolutely. So to learn about Athlete Soul, people can go on the website. So athletesoul.org is our website. We have all of our services described on the website, and people can apply for any of it on the website. And one thing I didn't mention before also is that everything we offer to athletes is free. So as a nonprofit, we raise funds that are then used to be scholarship for the athletes that work through our program. So I think that's a huge advantage for us, to athletes, and at a time where they may not be having a job or don't have the resources, we try to offer something that will give them a little boost. And then, social handle for Athlete Soul is @AthleteSoul, everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So we're pretty easy to find. And if anybody has questions or want to reach out to me directly, it would be info@athletesoul.org.
Okay, that's great. And I highly recommend people going out, checking it out. To find us, you can go to alumnidirect.com. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and then also follow the show, Athletes, Entrepreneurs, Alumni Journey, on YouTube, and also wherever you get your podcast. But this was great, Myriam. I really appreciate all the time, and I'm excited, and we'll talk more. Definitely see opportunities working together, helping athletes in this in this transition out of sports is pretty critical. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate that you gave me the time to share about my story and what I do with Athlete Soul, and I hope we get to do a lot together there's a lot of overlaps between our efforts.
Absolutely.